Welcome to No Instructions. I'm Bob.
And I'm Josh.
And you can't see us.
I can see you.
Well, yeah, but nobody else can. No matter where you're listening, no matter where you're watching, you can't see us. And that's because there's no cameras.
Yeah, we got rid of the video element, which was neat, but also pretty labor intensive and not all that rewarding, I don't think.
And we did some market research, I think is what the professionals call it, whereas we asked people and they said, nah, we don't really watch it anyway. It's like on in the background sometimes, but I listen to it on this player or this player or this player. Do you need nippers?
I do.
What are you working on? That'll make more sense.
Oh, I am working on a little Bandai X-Wing Starfighter kit that friend of the channel, Austin, sent us. He sent us like a bunch of really awesome stuff.
He really did.
And he says, in case of emergency, some no instructions kits.
Yep.
And so it's not that it's an emergency. I just don't have anything.
All right.
So I guess that technically is an emergency for what we do.
Makes it hard to make stuff if you don't have stuff to make.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so we did ask some people, and most of them, I think, were like, hey, if it helps you make the show more often, which it will, theoretically,
right,
then drop the video. So that's what we're doing. Because now, instead of needing Anthony all the time, we can just walk in here, hit record at a table, and talk. And then when we're done, we hit not record, and then we're done.
Yeah. And then I can take this, and I can still make the YouTube video, which we still have the No Instructions YouTube channel.
Yes.
So this will be put on YouTube for those people that are like listening at work, and they want to listen to it on in the background while you're doing stuff. Like that's still going to happen, but it just won't be us in real time, words to picture. It'll just be like, oh, the little DVD logo on the save screen bouncing around or something. We'll figure it out.
And if you really miss looking at us while you're listening, you can open one window with an old episode, turn the audio down, and then open a new window with a new episode and turn the audio up. And you're basically seeing the same thing every time.
I never thought that we would have to give instructions specifically to, and if you really did want to continue to look at us,
yeah, that doesn't happen.
Here's the way.
Nobody wants to do that. Anyway, so that's the situation. That's what's going on. We're just trying something new. And it's, for several reasons. One, so that we can record more often. It's taking some of the barriers out of the way. And also because this room that we record in is changing significantly. So we're focusing more on the online course thing that we've been trying to do. Had a successful course come out earlier this year. And we're working on some more. And so it makes more sense to have a dedicated space for that than for the video element of the podcast.
Yeah, we looked at what was necessary. And they're like, well, this is a podcast. People listen to us. And even if there was a video element, how vital was the video? And not really. So it took up a lot of infrastructure here in our office building for something that was not super vital.
Yeah.
And this way, we can use our like audio capturing device to the fullest. We have the ability to take calls, so we can have guests a lot more frequently. Because it was like, well, if we're going to have a guest, like, do they need to be on camera so people know who we're talking to? And it just became this really intrusive element of an otherwise very fluid show.
Yeah. And the Lego element with the guests is a thing. Like we talked about this offline, that you and I have gotten into the habit over 100 and whatever episodes of having a conversation, but also building something with your hands, following instructions or whatever in front of you. And it's actually kind of difficult. We've done it for a long time. But a new person coming in who's not used to being on podcasts, having to answer questions, think about their life, figure out the microphone, and build something, they're like, I don't know. Yeah. So we're making it easier for other people too. We did record another episode, the lost episode, as I will call it. What happened there?
We don't really know. Something here. So we use the audio capturing device that's sitting in front of Bob and I that you guys can't see right now. Something happened exactly 11 minutes into the episode that made our voices sound like angry robots. And then an hour and 11 minutes into the episode, it fixed itself.
Oh, I didn't know it fixed itself.
Yeah.
That's funny.
It for an exact hour, it was wrong. And it was a pretty good show.
It was.
I thought.
Yeah.
You asked me what I wanted to happen when I died, which was interesting. So maybe we had some stuff to talk about today. Maybe we'll come back to that if people really like. It was an interesting concept. I had never really thought about it, and you sprung it on me, which was kind of fun.
And we lost it.
It's gone.
I guess we could release the robotic version.
No, it sounded terrible.
I'm sure.
Oh.
Yeah. So yesterday, we had our friend Jeremy Fielding. If you don't know, Jeremy Fielding is a super awesome guy, but also a great engineer, and he has a YouTube channel where he like builds robotic arms and like all sorts of stuff. And he was passing through. He and I got to hang out a few weeks ago in Huntsville, and he was passing through and came in and hung out with us for the entire day. And we talked about having him on the show, but we weren't quite set up yet. And by the time we got around to it, it was like the end of the day, and it just didn't work out. But he's not that far away. So hopefully in the not too distant future, we can get him back up here or have him call in. And we'll have him on because he's a good dude. He's a dad, YouTube guy, so that'll be cool. What else has been going on? Since we lost that show, that was like me going on vacation and doing a bunch of other things. So they haven't heard anything from us in a very long time.
We put some stuff on the internet. People who care know what we've been up to.
Yeah.
But for those more relaxed listeners, we did something crazy for us as a company. Like we went to a sales conference, we went to a convention, not as like a speaker, but as a vendor, just like a regular old walking around, has a booth talking about stuff.
Yeah.
And it was
trying to sell things.
Yeah. So we have our online courses. We have the Fusion 360 course, and then we have now the Arduino course. And we've been trying to figure out how we can more appropriately structure the courses or market the courses for actual like educational purposes, not just like I want to learn how to do a thing, so I buy a thing on the line. Like we have a lot of teachers that have purchased the courses and use it in their actual curriculum. So we've been trying to speak to some educators to figure out if what we have matches some state standards or like what we need to do differently. And my wife, my beautiful homeschooling wife, was like, well, why don't you just market it to homeschoolers? Because there's not as strict standards. Homeschoolers are used to paying for a curriculum out of pocket and shopping around for different ones they want. So this is kind of makes perfect sense. And so there was a really big conference that happens every year that she went to a couple times. And so we decided to do it. So we needed to make a booth, and we needed to make it visually appealing and like be vendors. And you've had a booth before at Maker Faire.
Mm-hmm.
I've had booths in what's the word I'm looking at?
Craft
Craft shows. There, yeah. Thank you. I used to make customer furniture, and then I would make like little things to sell at craft fairs. But I haven't done it in a long time. And what was your experience now going to this as a vendor compared to what you used to do as a vendor?
Well, you skipped over a pretty important thing there. While I was on the beach and in Huntsville, you designed and built an entire booth of like constructed stuff. So,
I mean, yeah.
Well, there's a difference though, because like you made a bunch of stuff so that we could represent what we do, with like a big TV in the middle and like text across the top, and we had interactive Arduino elements, and we had it was really great. You did a great job.
Thank you.
But it's different because the time that I've had a booth before, it was like I just brought my stuff.
Yeah.
And there's a table, and then I put my stuff on the table, and then people would ask me about the stuff on the table, and that was it. This was like, we have to figure out how to pack it into the car. Which car do we have to take?
Yep.
How does R2-D2 fit on top of all the stuff that you made?
Oh, yeah. We decided to bring R2-D2, the thing that has never left your house.
Yeah.
Let's take it across state lines.
Yeah.
That sounds easy.
So we had to figure out how to get it all there, how to get it out of the car, through a loading dock, into a place that we'd never been. We don't know what it looks like. We don't know anything about it. And get it set up the day of. Like we pulled in, we set it up, and then people started coming in.
Yeah, we had an hour and a half.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
So it was very different from my experience because it just was a whole new set of stuff. And I would imagine it's probably pretty different from the craft show stuff, right?
Yeah, because I had a 10 by 10 kind of tent that you've had at soccer games and stuff, or like a cookout. And I think what made this one not easy, I guess, when you talk about the construction of the booth, like I went back to that experience and went, well, what did I do then? And I taped out a 10 foot by 10 foot square in my garage, and I set up my tables, and I knew exactly how everything was going to be positioned. I did like walk-bys from like as if I were a consumer. Like, how would they receive my stuff? Like, would you be able to see over people's heads to view the things that would differentiate us from the people next to us? And so a lot of that previous experience went into the design. And then Forby and his wife, they go to craft shows all the time. His wife is a weaver, and she makes her own custom fabrics and does a lot of amazing handmade goods that they sell at all types of craft shows across the country. And so the displays that we had, they needed to be tall. They needed to be obvious what we were selling or what we were offering. They had to be like an immediate value statement. So all those things went into the planning. And then Forby has a design for some of the big display booths that he designed a long time ago. We cut here on a CNC a couple times. And so we just really took that design and altered it a little bit to make it work for what we needed. Mm-hmm. So there was a lot of consideration into not just like, how do we make our stuff look cool? It's how does somebody receive like our information just passively walking past?
Yeah.
We wanted people to stop. How do we get somebody in this sea of sameness? People were offering books and like educational tools. Like, okay, well, so were we. So how can we differentiate ourselves? Mm-hmm. And one thing was like, well, nobody's going to have an R2-D2.
And they did not.
Yeah. And R2 was a big hit.
It was a huge hit. Like, and I kind of wish it wasn't, to be honest.
Really?
Well, I mean, I'm glad it was. But it made it so that if we ever do something like that again, I have to bring it.
Oh, you set that standard. Yeah.
Because, we're used to stuff like that because it's been around for so long. But also just like seeing something we've never seen before is not a big deal because we make a lot of things we've never seen before.
Right.
But for most people, they never even imagine that they will get to see a full-size, lifelike R2-D2 in front of them anywhere at any point in their life. Because why would you?
Right.
Right. If you don't go to Star Wars things, then you just don't. And so we had people walking by that would just stop and couldn't speak. And
it was like, such a fun experience.
What is that? Where is that? What? How did this get? Is that bigger than normal? How is, all this type? And it was really cool.
Yeah, I think that was the most fun. I mean, it was a challenge because we talked to a couple hundred people each and had to give a pitch to every single one of them. But I think the most entertaining part about that entire thing was that people don't know who we are. They don't know what we're capable of. And so when we go to maker fairs or workbench cons or maker centrals, like the wow element of what you do is dampened because everybody else has like okay, well, I could do that. I may do it a little bit differently.
Yeah, right.
Or that idea is novel, but the ability is not novel. And so going to a place where it's just regular people who are trying their best to teach their kids, and I'm talking about a design course or a microcontrollers course, I'm like, oh yeah, that robot that we built from scratch. And they're like, hold on.
Yeah.
Like you just built that. I'm like, yeah, we built that. And then the booth that I was standing in, we had a TV. It was showing like a bunch of I Like to Make Stuff projects that were relevant to the two courses. And one of them was the model that I had made of the booth because I modeled it in Fusion before I decided to make all of the little things. I was like, oh, the booth that I'm standing in and that box that you're looking at and that button that you just pressed, like all of that I made like last week. And just because I can. They're like, what? And that reaction was really fun because doing this for a living and I guess being really proud and capable, when you speak to someone that does not have that capability, it kind of knocks you into reality a little bit. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh yeah, you don't have this superpower yet.
Yeah.
And I think that was the pitch that I was able to give the most was like, okay, well, that face that you're making because you're impressed, like you could do this. And I repeatedly go, we're not special. Mm-hmm. Like we just figured it out.
Yeah. I mean, I can kind of identify with that feeling though. Cause I think I even had this conversation with you a long time ago when the motor is still dead being rebuilt on my Land Cruiser. But when I was talking to the guy that's going to put it back in, I was like, so once you get the motor back, how long is it going to take you to get it reinstalled? And he was like, 2 days.
Whoa.
I'm like, what in the world? How is that even possible? All of the things that are attached to a motor, any motor, and then every motor has different things attached to it, different attachment points, different, there's just so many. And to me, that seems completely ridiculous. Be like, yeah, 2 days. But him, that's what he does every day. So it's not overwhelming. And just like what we do is build weird stuff all the time, and it's not a big deal. But so I understand that feeling of just like, I don't even know how that's possible. And it's, it's context. But
it made me really proud to be able to get to talk to people about what we do and try to explain to them that, again, they could be in the exact same position. Like, you can make the silly things that you want in life. And there was videos of like the beds that we had made. It was a huge breadth of capability that was being shown on the screen as I was talking to people. And it was, again, like, we're not special. I'm just really cheap, and I'm clever, and I figured out a piece of software that allows me to be clever and cheap. And it was really nice to wow people, and then to see their reactions, and a couple of the parents that were like, I can do that. That's something that I think I would want to do. Or a couple of people that are like, well, I was into interior design or into something. I'm like, okay, well, have you designed anything that you want to make? And they're like, well, no. I'm like, well, this thing can. And I remember with this one group, I pulled up the model of the kitchen that I designed. I was like, I'm not a kitchen designer. I just know how to draw cubes. I just move them around in a space. And so to see people start to understand that it was not beyond their scope of ability was really cool to see in person, because we don't normally get to see that in person. Like, if people are affected by the stuff we do, we get to hear it every once in a while when we get to meet people in person. But like, to see that play out in real time, that like you are capable of more than you think, and people start to actually believe it, like, that's cool.
Yeah, we just, in our job, other than events, we don't have a lot of personal interaction. We get emails and stuff, but it's different when somebody has the time to sit down, think about what they want to say, type out the email. We get it. We have to wait till we have time to read it. Then we read it at our own pace. That's very different than you running into somebody and watching their eyes go, oh.
Yeah.
Oh, And I don't know that I could handle that all the time.
Yeah.
The amount of interaction and the amount of just people to do something like that on a regular basis, but it was really, really cool.
I thought about that, like people whose job it is. Like, there's a lot of the people in there that worked for different universities or different nonprofit groups, that it's their job to go around and just be the representatives at those types of shows. Or people that like work trade shows professionally. Yeah. Like, I was exhausted talking to people about something that I legitimately cared about. So if you worked at like a normal job and you're just like, well, I mean, it's neat. I sell software or whatever it happens to be.
Pens.
Yeah, like, to speak to that many people for that long and to put on that face, you either have to be like a very gifted salesman and you're really proud that you can sell anything, or to be super invested in the thing that you're offering so that it just like naturally pours out.
Yeah.
And it was super tiring.
Well, and there's some people that, I've always heard, I don't have this experience, but I've always heard that there's some people that just get energized by crowds, by interacting with new people. An extrovert feeds off of that. And I actually heard an interesting thing recently about an introvert. Introvert is not somebody who just doesn't like people. They only like a few people. Which makes sense, because if you, even an introvert will, if you get them excited about the thing that they care about in a small group of people, they will go hard on it. But anyway, extroverts, I think, are energized by that. So there are some certain people who would love that end of it and hate being in a shop by themselves all the time trying to make something. It's just a different thing. But.
Well, like, I fancy myself an introvert, and every time somebody walked past, like, I don't know how you saw that interaction between me and all the people. It was, don't make eye contact with that person. And I went, oh yeah, that's why you're here, is to make eye contact with people. And so I had to force myself. I like made a little catchphrase.
Yeah.
And I was like, hey, let me show you the cool stuff that we do. Or do you want to know about the cool things that we do? Something like that. And so I had to come up with that little like saying so that I wouldn't not talk to people.
Yeah.
Because if someone walked past and they didn't make eye contact, I'm like, samesies. Like, if you don't purposely want to look at me, then man,
cool.
Have a great day.
We probably would be friends, but I'm not going to find out.
And if someone looked and I was like, okay, let's like gauge microseconds of someone's stare. I'm like, okay, you've tripped past this threshold that I just made up of 0.7 whatever microseconds of looking at my booth. That means that you're interested.
Yeah.
And now I have to get you. And it became more of a game. Uh-oh, I broke the thing. Oh, geez.
Yeah, I saw a few moments where, man, I have an odd number of extra pieces. That's not cool. Where you were like, somebody was obviously not interested. They were walking by, trying to do the look away. I'm going to look the other direction, even though there wasn't anything across from us worth looking at. And you drew them in, and after a couple of minutes of talking, they were as excited as you were about the thing. And it was really fun to watch that. Like, you were like, oh, yeah, I'm going to get you.
Yeah. At a certain point, it did become a game.
Yeah.
And they had a group of girls. It was like these 3 like tween-aged girls, and we had a big button that you'd press, and it would do Arduino-related stuff on the backboards. And this one girl was standing behind the other 2, and the other 2 were just kind of like giggly and laughy and didn't really care, and their parents weren't there. And I was like, oh, do you know about the cool stuff that we have? And we had little like pamphlets that showed the stuff that we were offering. And they're like, I guess, and like being like teenage girls about it. And then the one girl in the back like kind of poked her head around a little bit and was like, seemed a little interested.
Yeah.
And then I like went past the 2 girls in the front and gave the girl in the back who had that little glimmer. I'm like, you need this thing. Go give this to your parents. And then she would walk past randomly, like with the thing in her hand and kind of like look at what we're doing several times.
That's funny.
And I was like, hey, did you go get your parents yet? She's like, no. And then eventually, like toward the last day, she came back with her mom and dad.
Yeah.
And they're like, she's been talking about this thing nonstop all weekend.
Really?
I'm like, don't submit to peer pressure. If you think something is cool, and then be excited about the cool thing.
That's a thing I've had to tell some of my kids recently, the older ones. Like, it's okay to really like something, even if nobody else likes it. It doesn't mean that you're weird. It doesn't mean that the thing you like is bad, because they probably feel the same way about something else, you know? Because, you know, as they've gotten into their early teen years, you can see they start to get too cool for certain things that I know that they actually still like. Yeah. They just don't want to admit it. I just finished Optimus Prime.
All done?
Yep, all done.
That's cool.
I'm afraid to try to transform him, but he does transform into a truck, which is really cool. But I'm going to move back to my my fake Lego Land Cruiser set. So make some noise here for a second.
So we wanted to talk about words. Ooh. And how words have meaning and how we've had to explain to our kids that words have meaning. And you had an example.
Specifically, which words are you talking about, Josh?
Bad words.
Dirty words.
Bad words.
Well,
we have a bleep button. We can use it if we want to.
That'd be fun. Ah! Oh, no. I have a bag of 1,000 little pieces that just dumped out. Well, I mean, I don't even remember how this came up, but I was having a conversation with my kids the other day, and oh man, this leads into so many different things. I feel like we've had a bunch of good ideas for shows that they all overlap, but we can't just do one super long show. Okay, so the words thing. I had a conversation with my kids recently about language, and I was trying to, how do I say this? I was trying to deal with a specific situation from a non-specific point of view. I know that something happened with one of my kids that I'm not supposed to know about.
Oh, okay.
And so...
That's a fun position to be in.
It's also kind of weird, though, because, you know, it's an interesting way to try to solve a problem.
That you already know the answer to?
Yeah. That they don't know that you know is a problem. Anyway, so taking an outside situation, I got to use it as the example talking about the words that we use to describe things and to say how we feel. And so my whole thing with them was, as soon as I saw the opportunity to talk about this, they were just like, they were asking something about a particular word. I don't remember what the context was now. But I was like, yeah, I mean, you know, it's just a word. Like, all of the words that we have in our language are sounds in other people's language. If they don't know the meaning, it's just a noise.
Sure.
Which is, you know, that's the way language works. So a noise is not innately bad or good. It's just noise. And that's why I think...
That's deep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think words really, even if you know what they mean, they're not innately anything. They're language. The thing that I was trying to impress on them is what matters is the heart. If I call you Optimus Prime, but I say it, and this is like straight out of the Bible, if I say, if I call you Optimus Prime, but there's hate in my heart, and that's the thing that's causing me to call you Optimus Prime, then that's as bad as any other word that I could possibly say, no matter what the word is. So I was trying to make the point to them that words are words. It doesn't really matter. It matters what you mean by them. But I was also trying to make the point as a social thing that like using curse words is lazy. Like it's just lazy. You want to use one F word to describe several different types of things? You can do better than that. And I was trying, and my kids are ones that like, if you challenge them, you're not doing as good as you could. They're like, oh yeah?
Oh, nice.
Check this out. I'm going to go get like 115% on my whatever test. And they're that. So one of them specifically, I knew that I could, oh yeah? That's for, talking that way is for people who don't have good vocabularies. If you want to make your point, instead of using a provocative word, use a descriptive word. Use something that actually says how you feel. Use something that actually says how mad you are about the thing, And so we had this big conversation, and, I didn't have a specific reaction from them and like, oh, yeah, that's what I'm going to do from now on. It wasn't like that. Mm-hmm. But I just saw this little opportunity to challenge them without them realizing that I was challenging them specifically about the things that they say and how they say them and why they say them and what they mean to the people around them versus what they mean to them, because those are not the same thing.
Oh, yeah. My son and I have had to have the conversation about loaded words or charged words, about like a word not in itself in the English language having one meaning, and then societally or culturally in the moment in time in which you live, it could mean something dramatically different.
Yeah.
And I mean, the society, not just like as Americans or whatever, but I mean, as Christians, like we go to church. And so to bring up a subject in church has some weird extra aura of wrongness. It's, I think, like a topic or a word.
Like saying the word sex at church is like really bad versus saying it somewhere else. Yeah.
You can't say crap at church. And I mean, it happened in the video. So in one of the most recent I Like to Make Stuff videos, we made the 2 beds for my sons. My older son, who has the second bed, the non-loft bed, there's an empty wall that we emptied out because we made drawers and a bunch of other stuff. And so I was like, oh, we can put some posters and stuff up. And we went to the store, and he had just watched Stranger Things. We let him watch it, and he loved it. And so there was the Hellfire Club logo, which is like a little cartoon devil horn with like some D&D dice and like a little sword and stuff. In our family, like, we're D&D people. We super love it. And in that moment, I'm like, well, we're going to put those on the wall in a video. I'm like, no, we can't get that. He's like, well, why can't I get it? I'm like, because of a bunch of weird tiny micro decisions that added up to a no, don't get that, or don't get that right now.
Yeah.
And he wanted to get a t-shirt like that. And I was like, sure, but don't wear that to church. And they're like, well, why? I'm like, well, because I grew up in the 90s and in the 80s where like people legitimately thought that you worshiped the devil. Like it was a huge thing in the conservative culture that, you and I both as Southerners grew up in, that people really thought that because you listened to certain types of music or you painted your fingernails or whatever, that you were some hellbound demonic person, like legitimately possessed by demons.
Yeah.
And I remember this conversation being like, as a kid, and I'm like, this doesn't make any sense to me. And so the words that they were using to describe something that they just didn't understand was so harsh. And as a parent, I had never been challenged, like you said, like that. Yeah. And so the opportunity to like, I like D&D. It's not devil worship. I liked Stranger Things. I thought it was a great show. And the icons from that show just happen to be of a devil head. And it's this weird irony. And in that moment, I defaulted back to like that primacy of like, nope, like the world is going to think you're a devil worshiper. And if you go to church and you talk about that stuff, like you're going to be labeled a Satanist. and you're going to be ostracized by people that, are meant to care for you. Not completely ignoring that most of the people that we know at church, like the people that he would interact, play D&D, love that show.
Yeah.
It would hit.
But it's a learned behavior. I mean, that reaction is based on
past stuff. Right. And I guess with the words, like growing up, certain words were a lot more taboo back then than they are now. I mean, maybe, but not so much. But like hearing a curse word on like TV was like, you had to pay a lot of extra money to hear curse words on TV.
Yeah.
And I remember on like in NYPD Blue, they said they said the S word one time. I don't think we timed that very well.
Okay, 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
We have a bleep really button. Fun. Cool.
But it was like they made a big deal about it, I remember. And it was like, oh, they're gonna say bad word on TV. Yeah. And it was the most like, hey man, you got a little bit of right on your face. It was the most like nothing thing.
It was like testing to see if they could get away with it. Yeah.
And then when South Park came out, when they were using all kinds of terrible language and the Beavis and Buttheads and all the shows that were gonna like make you into some low life degenerate, drug induced murderer. That stuff, as stupid as I thought, like now as a parent, I understand how dumb it was and how based in just pure uneducated emotion it was. It's hard to shake.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And it's strange. And like I went home today and what happened? Something happened in our house and my son went, Jesus.
Oh.
I went, you should not do that. Like he didn't mean anything by it. But I was like, don't do that. It makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And the conversation about an expletive, like he and I had recently, just kind of like you're talking about, like a word to describe your emotional state is difficult to conjure in that moment, especially when stuff is really impactful.
Oh, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that.
And so as a soldier, like that impactful moment is just about every moment because cursing in the military is like breathing.
Yeah.
And so being removed from that environment and I can actually have a real conversation with people. And I went to college when I got out and I was like, oh, people can actually explain how they feel in a moment. You can have a legitimate conversation with proven arguments. You can have a debate rather than just yelling or having some lapse in identification of an object or a feeling or a verb. And it was really comforting to be around people that didn't have to curse. And when I got here and I started working with you, it was that same way. Like I have heard you curse maybe twice. And people ask me that a lot. It's really funny when we get into groups. Like if we go to conferences and stuff, that's always a question that I get asked.
Which is so weird to me.
They think that just behind the scenes, you're just like some sailor spouting off. And I was like, Bob doesn't curse because he doesn't really have to curse. Like you don't get overly emotional about things, which I think is that people fall back to an expletive whenever their senses are heightened or they're overly stressed or like in pain or whatever. And it's just like a default to where people have that and it's not a default. But I forgot what word he asked me about, whether it was a bad word or not. And I'm like, okay, we got to talk about what a bad word is. And it's exactly like you're talking about. It's a sound, right?
Yeah.
And he was like, well, I heard this guy at church. He said frick. I'm like, uh-huh. He's like, isn't that like kind of a curse word? I'm like, exactly.
Like it's kind of.
Just a silly sound. Like there are some words absolutely that have been curse words and they've been taboo and like that word will forever mean will forever be bad. I don't think the F word is going to magically in 10 years mean happy. Like, well, maybe it will. I don't know.
Yeah, who knows?
It was the same thing. It was like, well, what is your intention with saying that word? Is it to relieve stress? Is it to show anger? Like those are expletives. Like those are supposed to be high points, super peaks in your language, in your vocabulary. Not that your vocabulary is just a crazy zigzaggy mountain range where it's every other word, because then you can't get your point across. And then it diminishes the meaning of that word or the impact of that word. Mm-hmm. Like if you stub your toe and you feel like you have to, like Mythbusters did a thing a long time ago, whether or not screaming curse words actually does relieve pain or stress or something like that. Like, I don't know. But I think just like anything, it will diminish the more that you use it incorrectly.
Yeah.
And it felt strange having a conversation about when cursing could be correct, or like its
right
place in vocabulary, why those words exist in the first place. Yeah. It was interesting. And I was like, well, this is not like forgiving you for cursing out loud, because again, you are a reflection of me and your mom. But to say a curse word when you're hurt or in those spikes, we're going to tell you not to say it, but like if you had to say it, that would be the moment to say it.
Right.
Which is a weird thing to say to my kids.
To like justify it. Well, yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's like, okay, so you could treat awesome the same way. This would be a good example. So I say things are awesome all the time. This Optimus Prime set that I just finished is awesome.
That's pretty awesome.
But so is like a sunset.
Mm-hmm.
They're both awesome, but they mean entirely different things. The sunset is like, I am absolutely in awe that this exists, that I can see all of the colors that are being represented right now.
Right.
That all of the physics and all of the things and all of the creation behind those things caused that moment to happen. That is awesome. But so is like a Lego that looks like a transformer, you know what I mean? In an entirely different way. But that word can be, and I'm absolutely guilty of this, can be completely deflated, become useless because I use it so much. Mm. So you can use that same analogy with a word that you feel comfortable saying in front of your kid to make the point, you know? And I kind of, when I was talking to my kids about this, like I did bring up like, you know, saying that it was lazy to use these words when you could use other words and stuff. And I was like, it should mean something. If you're gonna make the effort to say one of those words that you know is not correct in the setting that you're in, it needs to be worth it. Now, if you heard me yell a curse word right now, you would know that I was pretty upset, or I was hurt.
Yeah, you are in a peak situation.
Yeah, and it would stick out to them in a very significant way. Probably in the way that like they would remember that one time the dad said the thing, you know? So
I remember hearing my parents curse for the first time, or like they said the bad word, they said the F word.
Whoa.
And I remember my dad's listening. I remember when you said the F word.
Oh.
I remember it. And it was funny, and I heard you over the phone, and it made me laugh.
Does he know that you heard it?
I don't know.
He knows now.
I got my associate's degree when I graduated high school, and we had to go to Pensacola, which for us was a bigger city.
Yeah.
And we had to go to, I forgot where, but we got lost, and I was driving a car, and then my mom and dad were trying to follow us, and I had somebody's cell phone. It was early in days of cell phones. And my dad was driving, and I was talking to my mom, and I could hear him screaming because he was lost in town and was mad. And he yelled the F word, and I thought it was funny. But in that moment, I mean, to your point, I could tell for him to say that in that moment, like, okay, he is extremely bothered.
Yeah.
Like, I got the emotion. I got a lot of information from his response. And it took a lot, I imagine, or he was just very reserved as a parent. It took a lot for him to get there. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't empty. And my military career, the words that you use didn't mean as much as your actions. And I remember when I was flying, I became an instructor, and being in aviation, when you're speaking to air traffic control or you're speaking to people, like the words you say are extremely important. And so by one cultural norm, you could just curse and you could use the F word as every subject, verb, predicate, and be completely okay. And people would understand. And then having to get in a helicopter with some extremely intelligent people saying like every word that you say matters. Every word that you say matters. You only get a few words when you're speaking to air traffic control or someone else. So you have to choose your words carefully, and you have to be prepared. So you have to think before you speak. And I mean, I think everybody has heard that.
Yeah.
But it was the first time that it actually hit home to like pause, formulate exactly what you want to say, and then say it with intention and not just talk and like spout out. And that very necessary skill in that field, like translated, I was like, oh, I maybe should start listening and thinking about what I actually mean or what I want to say and just being more intentional with my words. And I was in my late 20s because I talk to my son now who acts a lot like me. And we talk about, at what point is he going to get blank? I'm like, I didn't get some of those points until I was an adult. And I think like learning to shut up and listen, I didn't get till, that moment. So the same thing about the words you say, it wasn't church that scared me out of saying those words. It was intentionality that encouraged me to find the right words.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point.
Yeah,
I agree 100%.
So I think the point that you made to your kids is like 1,000% right. And especially with young men, it's extremely important for, I would say, young men more than young women to look inside yourself to find the right word, because it's really difficult to explain emotions, to explain how you're feeling in a moment rather than just letting anger and hostility and rage and aggression like just bubble to the forefront. And curse words are right there behind it because it's a package deal. And to be able to pause and find the correct words is so empowering. And I think just like a powerful tool.
Yeah.
And as a father, like trying to use those words at my kids whenever they're throwing a tantrum or they're just freaking out, they're mad. Well, sure. But like, what does that mean? Like, did that thing scare you? Are you scared? Are you embarrassed? Because mad is a big dumb blanket that doesn't make any sense. Like, let's dive a little deeper. And so as a parent, to be able to talk to your kids in that moment or after the moments and give them that vocabulary, like, is super important.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I will admit that, like, I am a person who, I really care about the words that I say.
Yeah.
It took me a minute to figure out how to say that.
Good job.
I do. I don't have an amazing vocabulary or anything. I'm not going to go out and, speak with words that are not normal to everybody else. But how I say something, what I'm trying to get across is really, really important for me. And because of that, a lot of times, like when people use really incorrect grammar on a regular basis, it irritates me. Not because it irritates me for them. Like, you can do better. Like, you're not saying what you actually want to say. I know it because I know you. And I had this cousin that when we were growing up, she's fantastic, super sweet. But she is from a smaller town and just spoke in a very double negative kind of, whatever way. And she was going to college, and I'm like, man, it's working against you to not care more about how you come across to people, to be intentional about what you're trying to be to other people. The parts of you that you want to share are getting buried by the fact that you don't care about how you sound, or that you won't take the time to learn how to communicate in the way that other people communicate. It's all relative.
Sure.
They're all sounds. Double negative is a thing that somebody made up one time. Like, I get it. But we share the same language. And it works better for both of us if we can share that language in an equal way.
Yeah.
Completely. And so that's always really bugged me. And I try to be really careful about the words that I used, but I try to be very descriptive. And I think that has led to the way that I use or don't use expletives in life in general, paired with what we've talked about before, where I decided when I was a teenager, I have to be one person. That's it. I can only be one person. It's too much trouble to try to be one way in front of my parents, one way at church, one way at school, one way with my girlfriend.
Yeah.
I just can't do that. Like, I'm not capable.
It's too much work.
It is way too much work.
It's a lot of balancing.
And making that decision when I was at a place where I, like, you know, as a teenager, you're being pulled in all directions. Like, who am I trying to become? What am I supposed to be? What's everybody want me to be? All that stuff. It was just like, if I'm the same, then the same can become something else. But at least I don't have 4 personalities to keep up with.
Yeah.
I don't have 4 lies to keep up with, whatever. And so part of that choice was because I used to speak in a terrible way. And I'm like, I can only do this in certain settings. Why am I doing this? I just want to be one person. And so that led me to, I need everybody to understand who I am. And if I want fully to be known by my parents and by my friends and by my ministers and by my girlfriend, if I want to be fully known, then all of those things have to be open to all of those people, which means I can't be hiding parts.
Yeah.
And I think that informed just how I speak and like where I'm willing to be expletive,
right,
or to be excited or to be sad or whatever, like I don't want to have to hide. And now I don't have to hide as an adult. I've never had to hide how I speak in front of my parents. I've never had to worry about like, friends are coming over, gotta like act this way. You know, and I want my kids to understand that that is a possibility because they're not taught that that's how it's easiest to live. They're taught that like get away with what you can get away with when you can, and the rest of the time hide it. In all ways, in speech, in behavior, in following rules, all those ways. Just naturally, we are broken. They're taught to try to get away with what they can get away with. All of us were. And so I'm trying to figure out, speech is one way to do it, but I'm trying to figure out ways to let them know that like it's just easier to be one person.
Yeah.
And if you're gonna cuss it up, then do it everywhere. And at least your parents will know. Well, I mean, yeah, I'm not saying you should do that, but like, wouldn't it be easier to be the guy that you can't take him around grandma, to know that that's who it was, rather than like, well, I don't know how he's gonna act today.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
I guess I found myself being around the I have no filter people. And I really didn't like that because I think I was in the boat that you're talking about. Like I would behave a certain way around my colleagues at work. I would behave a certain way around my wife and my family. I am very as a career introvert. I am very adaptable to be able to adjust to the crowd that I'm in as like a special skill. Because I normally don't want to be around people because I don't understand how other people
like a social
think.
Chameleon.
Sure. I can turn it on.
Yeah.
And it became like, well, just mirror what they are doing. Just it's easier that way.
Yeah.
And then one time I was around a group of people and they were speaking the way that I would normally speak, and we were having a conversation about something, and they were just like, I remember thinking like, well, that's just a stupid person. Just like your opinions are based in nothing. You're the loudest person in the room just to be loud. I'm like, I really just don't like you.
I've met that guy.
So in so many ways.
Yeah. And
so that social chameleon, I'm like, I don't want to adapt to that. Like I can be legitimately who I am in this moment and go, none of what you're saying is right. You're being dumb and you're spreading your ignorance to other people. And I can't really remember the exact moment, but I remember that feeling that if this is how this particular group is going to operate, then I'm fine with not even being near the group. I got called a Bible thumper one time when I was in the Army, which for me was very strange because my beliefs are very quiet. I believe them personally, and I don't judge other people for the way that they were doing things. But it was this stupid person in his stupidity. And it wasn't that I was quoting the Bible. I was just like, well, what you're doing is like a despicable act as a human, and you should be ashamed of yourself because, humanity reasons. And I got called out in a group. And I went, okay, it's time for me to be able, like you're saying, to own who I am and not just conform to a group because it's socially easier.
Yeah.
And that guy kept saying, well, I just have no filter and people can't deal with it. And I'm like, I put myself through a lot of filters depending on the group situation that I happen to find myself. I'm like, I don't like that either. I don't like that I have no filter, and I don't like that I am everything in every situation to every person.
Right.
I'm like, you don't know what you believe. And so I'm just mimicking the things that are around me. So being in the military, people curse all the time. So I'm just going to because, it's whatever, that's how you speak. And then I saw a video of myself one time and it was in like a completely non-military context. I was on a college campus because my wife was still finishing her degree. And there was a video of she and I in her lab, her like science lab, surrounded by people. And I was just like F-bombing every little thing for no reason. And I was like, man, you sound so stupid. You sound like the I don't have a filter guy. It's bleeding over.
Yeah.
I can compartmentalize who I am depending on the crowd that I'm in is leaky. I'm like, ew, like, you should tighten that up and figure out exactly how you choose to believe and how I choose to carry myself. And you were a big influence on that.
Really?
Really. You lead a positive example. And I think anybody who's met you in real life and hangs out with you thinks that same way. You know what you believe. You know why you believe it. You don't really care. Not in like a proud or demeaning way. You don't really care if other people agree with what you think or not, because you have a solid foundation based in reason, and you boldly live your life according to those principles. And as a person who has had to adapt to these random groups that I find myself in, finding someone that is steadfast for reasons that they fully engage and understand is admirable. And so I have had to adopt some of those elements to my own life and go like, well, this is how I am choosing to move forward generally. And these are the reasons why.
Right.
And it's been really empowering and really liberating to go like, I'm not going to do that for these reasons. I'm not going to put myself in this situation, or I like this person, I don't like this person. I'm comfortable here, I'm not comfortable here. Here is why.
That's huge, because like we were talking at the very beginning, why is the Hellfire shirt bad? I don't know.
Yeah.
Because it always has been, because that's what somebody said, kind of, maybe not specifically, but it kind of is. But I mean, goodness, just to know why you think something, why you feel something, to know why you want to curse all the time and do it because of that reason, sure.
Yeah.
At least you know.
Yeah.
Like, that means a lot. So that's...
Well, my son, I mean, the Hellfire thing specifically, like, we were at the store. He was so excited about it. And I was like, no. But inside, I was having this, like, this crazy, tumultuous screaming fit between, like, there's no reason why he shouldn't have this. No, that means he's the devil and the church is going to be mad. Well, then people are going to think that I'm white trash and let my kid worship the devil. And it was like these stupid childhood, cultural, weird little battle going on in my head. And he's like staring at me, going, why? Why? Why can't I have it? Why? Can you tell me a reason why? And I was so overwhelmed in that moment. And I'm like, answer's no, we'll deal with it later.
Yeah.
And then later that night, I'm like, okay, now I have the ability to stop and think about what I want to say and communicate my reasoning with you. And it led to me apologizing. Like, in that moment, I was so overwhelmed and I was so stuck in the way that things used to be that I didn't think about you. I didn't think about his reasons for liking something. I didn't think about the simplicity of just enjoying a piece of art. And something that he and I shared together, like playing D&D is a thing that he and I share.
Yeah.
He and I watched the last couple episodes, so it was something that meant a certain thing to him. I and my baggage assigned a certain meaning to it and just like faulted him for it. And so later that evening, like, I openly apologized to him. That, like, there's no reason you can't have that. I'm like, these were my concerns. And it opened a conversation about, like, what is a cultural norm, what is right and what is wrong, how do you know what you feel is right and what's wrong, and not letting society try to pressure you into making decisions just because loud people want to be loud. And I think it was really beneficial because it had, like, beyond, we talked about like the demonic scare of like the 80s and 90s and stuff, but we also talked about like people being just bigots about things they don't understand now, against people who look different or people who act different, or people who choose to live their life in a completely different way. I was like, you can replace the demonic scare with the trans, like things that are happening to trans people right now. It's something different, and it's scary because it's different. Therefore, it's terrible, and we have to rally against it. And I was like, I'm here to tell you, and I want to communicate to you, I'm not rallying against it. There was just a lot going on in that moment. And so we went out and bought the poster. And it's not a thing.
Yeah.
And it was really hard for me to try to come talk to him hat in hand about my thought process, and an uncomfortable thought process.
Yeah.
And by all rights, I mean, if we were to poll the audience, I think I could have just stayed at no and walked away. And that could have been the end. And I was like, that's not right. Like, this is an ability for me to learn and for me to grow and for me to figure out why I'm feeling this way. Put the right words to it. Add the context around it. So that when he gets older, when he grows up in the world that is happening now, and there's people that are slanderous towards people because of the way they want to live their life, he can hopefully revert back to my experience in this Stranger Things demonic scare of the 80s and 90s and realize how pointless that was. But he would have never gotten the ability to experience any of that if I would have just left it at no.
Yeah. That conversation was, for him, I would imagine, a window into, a window past Dad said no, and into, like, oh, there's a world where social interactions and perception and people's opinions all intersect, and it's difficult. Not that you have the solution to it.
Right.
Not that what Dad says is always right. That's not true. We know that. But just the fact that they get exposed to the fact that there are things that are just hard to figure out socially. We're not always going to be on the right side of the fence on the way that we tell them to be, or the things that we are dealing with and how they're going to have to deal with them when they're our age. It's just going to be a different thing. In fact, I saw somebody post recently on Instagram, and they were like, people always complain about how when we grew up, you know, we stayed out till the lights went down in the neighborhood, and we could do all this stuff, and we could do all this stuff, and we're mad that our kids are not doing the same thing, but our kids are not growing up in that same world. And I thought that was a really good point, is we think about our own experiences relative to when those experiences happened, and we try to transfer that, for better or worse, onto our kids. They should feel the way I felt when I was that age, or they should be trying the things that I tried at that age. But they're exposed to entirely different stimuli than we were. In an entirely, I mean, like 150% different social scenario than we were, with different pressures, with different unknowns, way more technology. I mean, there's like so many differences about their childhood and our childhoods.
Right.
And even between your childhood and my childhood, which were not that far apart.
It's a 7-year span.
But they're different. They're like, and that's like an important point, is just like, we can't apply a context like the 80s devil worship thing. We can't apply that to now. But we also have to be aware that, like, it had an effect on us.
Right.
It made us think about things a certain way. And at least being able to have that conversation with him will hopefully give him a context to have that conversation later, whether it's with himself or with his kid or whatever, you know, about other stuff. So,
and it was also, like, to quickly round that story, it was also a lesson in pausing when you don't know what to do. I was like, I said no to you, and you heard one word. You didn't hear the mental math that was going, the thousands of conversations that were happening in my head in that moment based on so many outside perceptions and stimulus. And, you know, so I apologize that you didn't get to see my work in this math problem.
That's a good way to put it.
But in that point, I was in that store while you were barking at me, was not the moment to explain my work either. Like, this poster is not going to dissolve. I can go home, or I can go to the next store. I can take a certain amount of time and legitimately think about those things. Come to my actual formulated opinion, not just a hip pocket reaction, like talking about like what I have learned from you is knowing why I'm going to say what I say, rather than just like, I'm scared, I don't know what to do, the answer is no. So think about those things and talk about that social pressure that may or may not be there, because that allows me to talk about whether social pressure is right or wrong. And just I explained to him in that moment, like, you machine gun asking me questions and getting upset with me in that moment was making the situation worse, because then you became a very loud voice in that crazy mental math that I was doing. I was being yelled at by a lot of different areas in my life, and you were the loudest.
Right.
So let's hang out. Let's have a conversation. And then we eventually, he got what he wanted.
Yeah. And
I hopefully was able to communicate to him a little bit more than, yes, you can have a poster, no, you can't. And it's strange. I follow a Instagram channel called Christians Who Curse Sometimes. Because if I had to fit into a little label, I think that would probably be the most appropriate one for me. Because as a recovering potty mouth and a person that just like is continuously learning to think before they speak, and how to be a believer and how to be a steward of the things that God has given me, without like dropping some bad words every once in a while.
Yeah.
And I remember a friend of ours in our old church, she like openly in church, which is not like cursing like a sailor, but those words that you should never say in church. Oh no. Like, she was like, do you really care that I said that word? They're like, it's a loaded word and it makes you think a certain way about somebody, but it's like, it shouldn't mean, it shouldn't have all the baggage or whatever. And not that I'm leading some charge to like, we should all be cursing in church. But I don't think it is as dangerous as people think. Again, when it's used in like the expletive kind of context, and we were talking about forming like a Bible study small group. And I talked to one of the guys at church and I was like, I'm thinking about doing this. And he was like, oh, that's cool. I was like, so do the different small groups have like catchy names to like, oh, we're the older generation with college kids, and he was like, oh, this one group, they called themselves the biker gang because they just had this thing in common, to kind of let people know, if you're looking for a group, this is kind of what these people are about. And I was like, ooh, we should be the Christians Who Curse Sometimes. And my wife was like, absolutely not. You are not calling her small group Christians Who Curse Sometimes. And I was like, I think if I saw that, I knew what I was getting into.
Yeah, you'd be like, hey, that sounds pretty cool. Let's
I'm
go
a
check
broken
that out.
person.
Yeah.
I'm like, God is working on me. I'm trying my best, but I'm by no means perfect.
Yeah.
No one is. This is my fault up front.
Yeah.
And if you share that thing, then come on in and, we could be pals. But she said no.
Well.
But I think I get to fill out a form, so
okay.
Joke's on her.
All right, to switch gears completely, 100%. Before this, I told you that I learned something totally separately about words. I learned the other day by accident why plural goose is geese.
Okay.
And why moose is mooses.
And not meese?
Yes.
Okay.
So as English speakers, we just assume that those are both English words. Therefore, they should follow the same rules.
Sure.
Makes sense? They are not.
Okay.
So goose is an Old English word.
Right.
That describes the animal, the goose. But mooses didn't exist over there. Mooses were North American.
North American thing.
Which means the word moose is an Indian word, Native American word.
Okay.
And it crossed several different languages. There was a similar word for moose, and it sounded like the word moose. I mean, that was the sound that they made.
Right.
Across several different Native American languages. And their pluralization is entirely different than English. So it just happens that we have two words that both describe animals that sound similar, but they're from different origins. Therefore, they follow different rules. And it came into the English, moose and mooses came into the English language with that definition already in place as to like what the pluralization was.
Sure.
And I would imagine, I haven't looked into it, but I would imagine that there's all those other examples that people go like, well, meese and mice and all that.
Yeah.
I would imagine that's probably the same thing. I thought it was really cool, though. It makes total sense.
Word origins are fascinating.
And not everything came from English. Imagine that.
Oh, yeah. Do you know that the word bear is not the word bear?
I did not.
Oh, the story behind the word bear?
Okay.
It's fascinating.
Okay.
So the word bear.
We're an hour and 5 minutes.
It's all right. Thank you, people, for hanging on, because you're going to stay tuned for these little nuggets about animal names. Back in like Saxon times, the bear, the creature of the bear, was so terrifying that it was believed that if you said the name of that creature, it would manifest and it would come to you and attack you.
Oh, wow.
Like saying Bloody Mary in the mirror kind of thing. So the word bear, or the word Bern in Switzerland, the capital of Switzerland, they have a bear on their flag, just means brown.
So the word bear means brown.
It just means brown. And so they're like, what left that thing? And it's like Voldemort, like you can't say it.
Oh.
So it's like, oh, the brown thing. And they're like, the brown thing. And so that's where the word bear comes from. So like if you look at the binomial nomenclature of the creature, it has absolutely nothing to do with the name. It means brown.
So they just didn't have. So a brown bear over there is brown.
It's just brown because I think the bears over there were brown.
And a black bear is a black brown.
I think it's like there's a Dimitri Martin joke in here about like which one was named first, oranges or carrots. Like someone from Switzerland saw a black bear, they're like, "What the heck? You guys have those too? They're just a different flavor." But yeah, the word bear just means brown because they couldn't say its name.
Okay, well. That's a new thing.
That's fun.
That is pretty cool. I have I'm missing parts, and I'm not going to be able to look them up while we're talking. Plus, we've been going for an hour and 7 minutes, so I say we wrap it up.
Okie dokie.
I hope everybody enjoyed this one. Thanks for hanging out with us. We will hopefully be back sooner than later because it's easy to record.
Yeah, and let us know. Again, this is going to be on YouTube for those people, including my dad, who receives the podcast on YouTube. Let me know if you feel slighted or shortchanged because you're not like... You can't see what I'm doing with my hands right now. So let me know if this has worsened your experience with the podcast.
But also it's free.
Factamundo right there. It's easier for us.
Yeah.
And if you like the podcast, if it's easier for us, it'll be better for you.
Sure. And it will happen more often probably.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, big thanks to the Maker Alliance for making the show possible. We are very grateful for everybody over there. I had a meeting with them the other night on a Google Meet. We do on a monthly basis, and we talked about this specifically, about taking away the video component, and it was really cool to just ask people who listen face-to-face, what do you think about this? Got some great feedback from them. And so it's always a really cool time. Discord is active, and there's lots of conversation over there about this show, about making it, about all the videos, about all the different topics, all this stuff. So if you want to go check that out.
Summer camp that they're putting on,
yes.
that we are all putting on, is happening in August.
In August. It's a really cool kind of big deal. And you can find all that information over there. So go to iliketomakestuff.com/join, and you can check out the different ways to join up with that crew. It's very cool. So big thanks to them. Thank you to you for listening and watching something that's not us, probably at the same time. And we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye. I get to push the button.